Hi guys, this is Divine. Thanks for tuning in. I will be loading some other short videos regarding my personal case, regarding Florida. But to further specify my details based on yesterday's video, um, I was able to recognize that I was being targeted by basically observing, and paying attention to my surroundings. And I noticed people were following me. I noticed things I would say in private conversations would be brought up by stranger and unusual encounters. I noticed cars following me because I pay attention to my rear mirrors. I would get off an exit and go to a gas station. They'll follow me as well, and etc. I noticed this very violently once I moved out of the state. Um, it was like, how dare you move out of the state? And it became like black SUVs. It became really more noticeable after I moved to another state. While I was in Florida, it seemed that my ex-husband would keep tabs on me. And he had access to my email account. He had access to my social media accounts. He had access to all my accounts. And he could have used emails and social media to text, send out communications on my behalf without me knowing and reading it, and I would have never known. That could have happened, but also he would keep tabs on me and tell on me, like my whereabouts and where would I be, where to expect me at certain times, etc. So that's how you get targeted when they will get to people close to you when you are being targeted. Not just your partner, like whoever you live with, but also family members. They will get, and they will look so innocent. They will approach you as a friend. They don't go insults. They approach you as a friend, as someone concerned for your, daughter's well-being, in my case, to, concerned about your wife's well-being or your husband's well-being, depending what side they're targeting, female or male. They come as a friendly person who's so concerned, so well-intended. I was part of, I'm not a religious person, but I had to go to a religious community because I was putting my kid in his daycares, these random daycares out, and they were horrible. And this was in Florida. Like I said, I had to move out of the state. I was being targeted. Everything was weird and bad, and I had to leave the state, and so I did. And right after I left the state, the targeting became intense in another state. And that's when I was like, it is totally total targeting and etc. But while I was it started in Florida. I moved to Florida in the year 2000, and I moved out around 2019, 2020. So I lived there for a very long time. But I noticed this after I got married. So, which makes me think it's related to my ex-husband or his family. Which then you start thinking, who were they connected to? And you start like looking at the details of the person's lives and, who were their family, which me telling my personal experience is really just for awareness that one, that state, like my previous video, thinking gay is like beyond thinking gay. They pretend to be a freedom state, and they are absolutely not. As a matter of fact, my targeting started there. And, you have to build awareness. You have to look at red flags as what they are. Red flags. Don't try to sugarcoat it or, oh, maybe I'm being picky. No, you're not being picky. And for political people, I am not a liberal. And I'm not a tard. I like to look at policies and vote according to policies. Um, but I hate the liberals and the woke. But I do identify with, for example, RFK, make America healthy again, and certain, almost all MAGA policies, except a few. So it's not like it's a political narrative to go against Florida. DeSantis would be great if he actually did and stood and made it happen what he says he would do or what says he does. That's what I mean speaking gay. It's a politician's line, as usual. So it's this the reason. It's not a political video to politicize. It's really about bringing awareness because then it happened in South Florida. And South Florida is very liberal on the liberal side, full of immigrants, full of Cubans who can't speak English, full of Cuban flags on many streets. They'll have more Cuban flags than American flags. And in the streets names are Hispanic, are in Spanish. And, you know, so it's not political. Just wanted to put this out there because it seems everybody's politically divided lately. And I want to make sure it's not about this. So you can recognize, and if you're in that area, you're new to the area, just be aware um, of the Cubans. There is a Cuban mafia that lived there for a very long time, as I told you before. And many places will treat you different and will not give you the same benefits if you're not Cuban. And if you end up with a Cuban, be very careful. Very careful. Because they only support each other. So if you're whatever you are, white, I'm not Cuban, I'm not even Hispanic. Whatever you are, if you're not Cuban, they will treat you differently and cast you out with a smile on their face. You won't even notice. And that's why it took me a while to understand what was happening, how I was being targeted, and why I was being targeted. I never got full closure as to why I'm being targeted, but due to my case, I'm seeing is because I moved out of Florida. Because I wanted to give more light into my personal case. Because it's, it seems crazy. And everyone I tell, my niece, they're like, that's not America. I'm like, yeah, because Florida is not America. It's like a Latin America in terms of corruption. It's that level of thorough country corruption in Florida court systems, the DOJ, law enforcement, you name it. So I moved out with my family. I was still married when I moved out of Florida. My ex-husband at the time, we were still married, we were together, and he moved with the children and me to another state. And exactly after 6 months of moving out, he decides to file for divorce. And the kids were going to school already in the other state for that amount of time. We were already out of the state for like a while already because we were months RVing around the nation trying to find the perfect place to move out from Florida. So it seems as when I look back, he planned it because, mind you, he's an attorney, and again, be mindful about attorneys. Don't trust them. And never trust a Cuban. Ever, like ever. And this is my personal experience. This is personal advice I live by. So what you do is up to you, okay? You know, and the statute states once you are living in another state for like 3 months, you're no longer a resident of the parent state. And for children, it's 6 months, and that's the state of Florida. But somehow, they decided to file the divorce in Florida when we were living in another state. And he found a judge who was also Cuban. So again, I'm bringing up the Cuban mafia for a reason because many involved were Cubans. And there's that influence that is deadly in their court system. That's why it's so corrupt. Because of this kinds of third world country influences. And they are communist, and the Cubans are, even the people. They never lived in true freedom. People who has never lived in true freedom, they won't understand. They'll say they're fighting for freedom, but they don't know what freedom looks like. And that's my personal experience living there with those people. They will say whatever you want to hear so they can keep, maintaining what they have going on, which is that mafia and it underlow. That's why I'm bringing it up and bringing light to it. Hopefully they'll be investigated or something. But he found a judge who said, no. Florida is the right jurisdiction. And I'm like, that's impossible because nobody lives in Florida. How is Florida the right jurisdiction for a divorce where none of the parties in this divorce nor the minor children have lived in that state? And the judge just lied. And I have, between the transcripts and my motions and between what was shown, he just lied from day one because for some reason they wanted Florida to have jurisdiction over my children. And I realized the judge was bought from day one when this is back in like beginning of 2021, end of 2020. So this is like almost 6 years ago. I'm still dealing with this bullshit, by the way. It's 6 years into a fucking divorce, and I'm still dealing with the fucking bullshit. It's insanity. And they ended up taking my children away from me. We had 3 homes. I was homeless. I was forced into being homeless while my ex-husband got to cherry pick which property to keep and which property to sell and how much of the money to give me. It was all under his command. It's like the court saying you're gonna obey him. And I'm like, he's not even my husband anymore. Like, in mind you, he asked for the divorce. So he filed for divorce and walks away from the marital home in our new state, starts telling these crazy stories that he never lived Florida. My cousin who never lived Florida will be living in another state for, And by the time the actual hearing for my divorce came, it was already way over 3 years. Way over 3 years. It was like 4 years already that we were moving in another state. So when you first filed for divorce, it was like almost 6 months. It was like 2 weeks away from 6 months. And then by the time there was a hearing and a trial, mind you, I had to have a 3-day trial for a fucking divorce in Florida. Because they didn't want to let us go to another state. And 4 years later, when I finally have my child, they take away everything from me. And at that time, they didn't take away my kids. But they did take away my kids from my state, from my which is my state, my current state. They forced my children to move out from the current state that we have been living in for like 4 years now, back to Florida, because they said you never lived in another state. Look at the crazy shit. Have a driver's license in my new state. I got a driver's license in 2021. Like the kids started going to school and their school transcripts to prove it. This 2020. But this crazy judge, corrupt Cuban crazy judge, oh yeah, said I never lived in another state. I was in a vacation because of COVID. I was like, are you insane? And yes, they are insanely corrupt. And it's crazy. Like, if you read my transcripts and he falsified information that I testified that I would move back, I'm like, I never said I would move back to Florida if you hope so. I said you would be forcing me and my children to move to Florida. And he wrote down in an order that I agreed to move back to Florida. I was like, lies after lies after lies. The guy just lies. And he signs off that he's lying, and there are transcripts to prove I never testified to such things, but he doesn't care. That's how confident these people are in their corrupt stance that nobody's coming for them. And effectively, I went to appeal courts. I went to appeal based on the lie because he basically made a decision that my kid will be taken away from the new state because I agreed to move back to Florida. And I said, I never said that. He's lying. And when that was written for the appeal court then said another lie. Oh no, the judges that you're ruling right because you have a Florida driver's license. And I'm like, what? I don't have a Florida driver's license. In fact, no one asked me if I had for my driver's license. No one asked me. And I'm like, no one asked me for a driver's license. And if you want me to show you, I have my new state's driver's license since back in like January 2021 or March or something, since the beginning of 2021. And this is already years later, down the line when there was finally a hearing, it's like 2023, 2024. And these people they just lie. It's like what I call weaponized incompetence. So they pretend it's like not a big mistake, but it is because we're affecting my children's life. You're affecting my life. It's a huge mistake in our lives, And these courts in Florida, they don't give a damn about children. They don't give a damn who they're hurting. They don't care. And so and then I told the appeal and appeal your appeal, obviously. And then they're like, no, you can't. And that was it. So then I went to file a complaint with the Florida commissioner's judge or the state commissioner's judge. It's the only way you can file a complaint against a judge because DeSantis has laws that he passed that protects judges. So you're powerless. Legally, you're powerless against judges in that shithole state, So I filed a complaint, received a letter that they're revising my case. A year later, nothing. I'm like, seriously, nobody's gonna do a damn thing. Like, the guy's literally lying. I have proof that he's lying. The appeal court's lying because no driver's license was ever provided as evidence from my case. So I don't know where did they get that I have a Florida driver's license. I don't know. They look in the system about your old driver's license. I'm like, they just see that I got a new one. It's crazy, so nothing happened. So then, like, not too long ago, 2 months ago, there was another motion because my ex-husband wasn't happy that the court was trying to force Catholicism into my children, which is against their First Amendment. And I declined based on our First Amendment. I said you cannot force my children to go to Catholic school without my will and consent because I'm not Catholic. Whether you think I'm Catholic or not, just because I got baptized, that's your problem. I'm not Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic. I'm not none of those things, And so they forced They were trying to force Catholicism, religion, a particular religion, by the way, of Catholicism into my children against the mother's will of consent, which is me. And I fought it, and I went after the school. And I went after, in many ways, I went after them legally. I filed motions, and the judge just kept denying or postponing. And 3 years into this, the judge finally has a hearing to modify the original order. And when I get there, they just take away my kids. And they say the reason is I'm a horrible mother. And with no facts, nothing to say that I'm a horrible mother, while the father had 2 counts of domestic violence against my children. And somehow I'm the bad mother because they put a guardian ad litem into the case. And the guardian ad litem never interviewed me, never contacted me. And told the judge and testified this, that she had a bad feeling about me, even though she never interviewed me, never spoken to me like, never interviewed me. She spoke to me for maybe 1 second when she went to see my kid, and that's it. And she said, I have a bad feeling about the mother. And I feel like she's coaching the children to dislike Miami. And that is a horrible thing. And mind you, my kids, my daughter is a teenager. And my son, it's going to be a teenager in like a year and a half. So my children are not toddlers, right? They can think for themselves. They have their own personality. I don't have to coach them that Miami is a shithole. They know it because they came from a better state. But so they took my kids away based on the fact that some guardian, my children's guardian that's supposed to represent my children, felt vibes, right? Had negative vibes about me, and that she felt like I was coaching the kids to not like Miami because it's impossible for someone to not like Miami. It's crazy. And so they took my kids away. And that's how I know that targeting is on a state level and possibly on a federal level, because if I'm in another state and they were following me and targeting me in the other state, obviously there's federal involvement. So, be mindful, be aware, pay attention. And when you try to leave, they're going to try to go after you. Sadly, for some reason, you can't live where you would be happy or where they don't have control. It seems that maybe they don't have much control in my new state. That's why they wanted me to be back so badly in that state. They don't want you to leave the prison they created for you, the control prison. And I don't know, they must have been controlling me with my ex-husband. But if I'm divorced already, which I am and have been for years now, almost 6 years, they're not going to be able to control me regardless of where I am. So I'm not so sure it's so much about control also, but if I'm in a state where they can control everyone in that state, they're going to control who's going to be my new friends. If I stayed in that state, they would control who's my new partner. If I stayed in that state, they'll control everybody in my life. If I would have stayed in that new state. So I think it's about controlling that manner, all right? Not necessarily, they can't control me personally, so they try to manipulate and control the people around you. So when you go to another state, it makes it harder for them, because if they have set up pawns, specifically like Hispanic, Cubans, etc., you go to a state that has less of that diversity, it's less likely that they can find people who they can control and manipulate this in the same manner. God knows how. It could be for social programs. Many people there are run on social programs, etc. So I'm assuming social program is huge. So it's related to trying to set up some control mechanism. And I don't know exactly why targeting specifically. I don't know. I just know I was being targeted. There are many good targeting videos. I can put some in the link descriptions that describes. And you can even Google it. I'm also part of the targeted network where other people are targeted and they network together and, create awareness of targeted individuals. So you can be aware, look at the people closest to you, how they're acting. Coincidences aren't coincidences. There are too many red flags. That's that may be something. What you do about it or not, it's up to you. I'm just sharing for the purpose of if you're in that area, be aware, be careful, keep your eyes open, um, do a lot of research. I'm not a professional of any sort of targeted. I was a victim of being targeted. So from a victim's perspective, I'm sharing what happened to me in case it helps somebody. So thank you. I'm gonna leave more information on the description and thank you for watching.